Good morning and welcome to Frontiers of Knowledge segment of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. The last Olympics were being visualized as troublesome because of the heavy pollution, dust-laden skies, and then a miracle happened. The weather was excellent, and the Chinese were credited with this miracle of science. But then, are Chinese really that great? Was it a sudden moment? No. It is a long history of experimentation that has been successful at many places. And it has been seen that the clouds can be prodded to make more rain and more snow. But then, is it ethical? That's one question. But really, one thing is sure, that human beings might not be able to control weather, but they can surely modify to suit their convenience, need, and necessity. And cloud seeding is one such type of weather modification. And you'll be amazed that there's nothing miraculous about it once you know the reality. It's the fine art of injecting chemicals. The chemicals can be dry ice, which is just solidified carbon dioxide. It can be silver iodide, and even table salt, for example, the table salt which you use every day. And that is injected into clouds. As a result, the weather outcomes are altered, changed as per your need. There is an association called Weather Modification Association, and they say that 8 states in USA, cloud seeding has been used to boost the precipitation, especially winter snowfall. Now, we know that we suffer a lot from drought in Sahara, parts of Middle East, Thar Desert in India and in Pakistan, and so on and so forth. So cloud seeding is a popular tool. Unfortunately, it has not been used in India or Pakistan to cope with the lack of water shortage that can occur from drought or snow drought. There's less snow, so there's a water shortage. And that is especially across these countries and even the western United States. However, as I said earlier, its efficacy, whether it can be optimally used, and ethics are hard subjects of debate. Now, what's the history? As I said earlier, what the Chinese did was no miracle. It has been more than almost 4 decades of research that have gone into making this successful. An ultra-modern cloud seeding sounds. It's not sound. It's not a new concept. It was invented in 1940s, and it was two scientists working for the General Motors, Vincent Schaeffer and Irving Legmore. They were trying to ensure that the icing doesn't take place on the airplanes. Now, icing occurs when the water is cool, droplets of water residing in the cloud hit and immediately freeze onto the aircraft surface, and a layer of ice is formed. So if that can be stopped, it will save a lot of time because that can be a problem. So scientists were thinking that if these droplets could solidify into ice crystals before binding to the aircraft, because once they become crystals before falling, then they don't stick, but they are not binding. So what would happen is that the wing icing threat would be stopped. But then, as I said, it is supercooled water. What is supercooled water? Supercooled water is water that remains in a liquid state despite being surrounded by below freezing air. So it might be freezing, 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit, but it remains in liquid state. And you know what happens? Only purest water, without sediments, without minerals, without any dissolved gas, absolutely distilled clear water can be supercooled water. Any adulterated water coming from the tap would not be supercooled. So this supercooled water would not freeze unless it reaches minus 40 degree or hits something and freezes on it. So Schaefer, what he did, he tested this thing in the lab by exhaling into deep freezer. Now imagine you can do it yourself. Go to your deep freezer, open it and exhale it. And you will find a cloud of your breath. But then he was not satisfied with it. He dropped various material, soil and dust and talcum powder into that freezer to see which one would best stimulate the growth of ice crystals. And upon dropping tiny grains of dry ice in the cold balls, a flurry of microscopic ice crystals were formed. And this was the Eureka Moment. He must have jumped like Archimedes, because he had discovered how to cool a cloud temperature to initiate condensing, and thus cause precipitation. Just a few weeks prior, another scientist working in the General Electrics, Bernard Wonger, discovered that silver iodide served the same purpose because its molecular structure closely resembles that of ice. So you don't have to have carbon, solidified carbon. You can have silver iodide, and that causes the gasification which is required. Now this research, the moment it was done, as I said, it was a Eureka moment, and globally people started thinking it. The government of USA partnered with GE to investigate how viable cloud seeding might be for producing rain in desert areas, in arid zones, and also whether it could reduce the intensity of hurricanes. So 1947 October, cloud seeding was put to tropical use, and the US government department dropped over 100 pounds of dry ice into the outer bands of Hurricane 9. Now Hurricane 9 was also called 1947 Cape Sable Hurricane. And the theory was that the minus 109 degree Fahrenheit frozen carbon might neutralize a heat-fueled hurricane. The results were inconclusive, but the storm, which had been tracked out to sea, it reversed course. And the people were very happy. People who were bracing for disaster, for havoc, they were happy. Because of this ice being dropped, the hurricane changed the course and made a landfall near Georgia. It was later on known that began to veer prior to hurricane. So this was Project Cyrus first. Then came Project Stormfly, Skywater, and many others. And it was especially during Kennedy period, during the 1960s, the government commissioned a new wave of hurricane cloud seeding projects. There was Project Storm Fury. The experiment proposed that by seeding a hurricane's outer cloud with silver iodide, the convection would grow out at the storm center. This would create a larger but weaker eye of the hurricane, which will reduce the wind and reduce intensity. But then this was failure, and then it was seen that it would not have much effect on hurricanes because the clouds naturally contain more ice than the supercooled water. And for the next 30 years, 3 decades, several more programs came up. Project Skywater, led by US Bureau of Reclamation. It was focused on augmenting water supply in the western USA. Then, because these scientists and when the government funding is there, you have to show the results. In 1980s, the interest flagged. But the Bureau of Reclamation continued working on that. In the meantime, UAE came up in a big way. And they started doing it and they were very successful. Now, how does this work? In nature, precipitation forms when the water droplets suspended within clouds grow large enough in volume to fall without evaporating. So these droplets grow by colliding and joining with neighboring droplets. So either they freeze and become ice-like structures, or they fall like rain. Now, cloud seeding is like a catalytic agent. It boosts the natural process by injecting clouds with additional nuclei, thus enhancing the clouds with additional droplets that grow large enough to fall like raindrops or like snow, depending on the air temperature within and outside the cloud. And these synthetic nuclei come in the form of chemicals, I told you, silver iodide, common salt, dry ice. And all are basically dispersed into the heart of precipitating product in clouds. Then, as I said, when USA started faltering, UAE came. And in 2017, UAE conducted 250 seeding projects. And they tested new technologies, which was a drone would fly into a cloud and deliver an electric shock. So no seeding by the chemical, but a drone flying into the cloud and releasing electric shock. And according to the University of Reading, this method ionizes the cloud droplets, making them stick with each other and thereby boosting the growth rate. Chemicals, goodbye, because chemicals can be toxic, and especially silver iodide is very harmful to the marine life. So it was an eco-friendly seeding option and very important. It has been seen that seeding is traditionally credited with boosting rainfall by up to 15%. In 2017, when UAE was doing it, Idaho-based winter cloud seeding took place, and a snow gauge analysis took place of the benefit. It was revealed, now this is amazing, that 100 to 275 acres of water could be produced in one seeding. That's enough to fill 150 Olympic-sized swimming pools. And then this technology basically was utilized, rather a combination of. So they did the common salt, they still the silver iodide, but more important was they used the electric charges to disperse the clouds and make them rain. Thereby, when the rains fall, the air is cleaned, the pollution goes off. And Olympics were a great success. So this is quite an improvement, an enhancement on the nature. It's a great boon for the arid zones where complete revolution can be there. Those desert areas can become blooming fields and farms. And that is something which is great for the human beings. I wish that the governments, instead of wasting money on the nuke bombs and the arms, was doing something to ensure that this weather transformation or weather modification is normally utilized. It becomes a norm. You know drought is coming, so start using the cloud seeding. You know that the rainfalls are going to be heavy, use those to drive them away. So do the modification. Tsunamis are coming, use these weather modifications to save humanity. And that would be a blessing. But studying the history, I found that human ingenuity is endless. How far we use it depends on us, our foresight, our capability.